Coming up, gut punched in the fourth. The Brooklyn Nets battle all the way back on a great performance from Cam Thomas, only to be smited by Steph Curry. We break down the 1-3 now West Coast trip for the Nets coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. And Doug, 124-120, maybe a game you thought was already done at a certain point. The Nets really do battle back, so it only makes it that much worse that they don't get it across the line and get the win.
I mean, credit to the Nets. I thought this game was over 4 separate times, and it still went down to almost the last shot. And so I guess we could start by talking about how this team does really fight. Like just about every game this season, they've been in. Even games where it felt like they could have easily rolled over. I've watched enough NBA this season to know that there's plenty of other teams that do roll over in these situations kind of time and time again. The Nets just aren't built like that. And so it's a credit to them. It's what makes sometimes when we get to this point, where it makes the losses feel that much worse because it feels like, what could have been. And I think this, if there's a theme of this season, I think it's two things, right? It's like the team has outperformed expectations, I think, in the macro sense, and there's still a what could have been because there's been so many games that they've been in late that they just didn't pull out, right? And so this one definitely fills into that same theme. We saw, against the Cavs, against the Mavs, against the Hawks. I mean, we've seen lots of games where it looks like they could get over the hump, and some they have. And then this one they didn't. But this was a weird game. We're going to talk about a lot of it. Cam Thomas, Steph Curry, obviously all this stuff. But I think for me, like that's where this one lands. It's along a thing that's tracked for the Nets this season, which is they stick in games, they fight really hard, and when you do that, you might be like coin flip at the end, and they're kind of probably trending around 50% where that's concerned.
Yeah, and you give up 70 points in the first half to the Warriors. Obviously, you're down double digits. And as you mentioned it there, they go to the fourth quarter. They're down 89-95, and they close this thing out. They end up being up at one point here as they get down into 99-99. They knotted it up, and then they got up 101-99. And that quickly turned right back around on some three-point shooting from the Golden State Warriors, as we often expect them to be. It's funny, man. I will just say on the now 1-3 on the road trip now, we talked about this after they got the win against Phoenix. It was like, well, okay, come on. We got to dial this thing up. It's gone the wrong way the last two games, which is unfortunate. But then the other part about like raising the expectations, I do wonder, it's like, now when does it switch, right? Because I agree with you that this is a game you could have folded up and not been a part of it. Could have been a blowout and, all the scrubs were in the fourth quarter. Okay, fine. But the other side of it is now that you've exceeded expectations, it's set a new bar of expectations, right? And that's really why when you and I talked about this game, it was like, well, you have to go get this win against the Warriors now. They're not the same Warriors team. Turns out it's the same Steph Curry, but you felt like this is a game that you could have and should have gone out and win. This is a 10-14 team in the Warriors. So I do have a little bit of disappointment, like just behind this all. It's great that they've battled back. It's great that they don't check out. And also, I think I look back at this game and say, you probably shouldn't have. I know you shouldn't have given up 70 in the first half. You shouldn't have been down double digits the way you were, because it always makes that climb to get back into it that much harder.
Oh, yeah. Don't get confused. I don't think this is like a moral victory, and I'm definitely not in a good mood about it. I felt very bummed. Like watching that Mikal, almost uncontested layup not go down in the end was brutal. I guess I was just trying to look at it from a macro level. On a micro level, I feel the same way. I feel like you come out of this and you're like, oh, it's deflating. You want to see them get over the hump. You want to see them get into these late game situations and be able to take it down. You want them to win, and they definitely could have won. This game didn't sort of track like some other close games we've seen,
Yeah.
in that it wasn't close all the way throughout. The Nets also made just some absolutely brutal errors that can end up making you feel even worse. I mean, like inexplicable turnovers, lots of them in this game, like 2 Dinwiddie throwaways. The Claxton one, they get the foul call at the end from Royce with 0.1 seconds. I mean, there's some super weird stuff that happened within this game. Any one of those things, and you think to yourself, maybe the Nets just win by a couple. I don't know, probably not, but and then you look at, I'm not even playing at the feet of any of these guys. It's more to say that like this game just tracks a season-long theme, and we felt massive, and we felt massive disappointment after each one of those other games that I just mentioned before. Right? Like it is disappointing. It's just it just has been the theme. I just didn't want to gloss over the fact that they are the reason that we are disappointed, and the reason the expectations go up is because the team plays so hard every night. That was the only point I was trying to make.
No, and you're right. But yeah, right. You can't be disappointed in a close loss unless you're in a close game to lose it, right? Which is like, it's like this unfortunate way to frame it. But you go, but unless you're a team that's scrappy and is going to battle back and knock down big shots and make a game of it in the fourth quarter, then we're actually just talking about a season-long theme of how this team fades. And when they're down at half, they don't come out with the same sense of urgency in the second half of these games. So ultimately, it still goes down as a loss on the score sheet. And
it's a sports fan's paradox, because you are stuck in this
good enough to
weird
compete, maybe not good enough to always win, right? Like
totally. And this game, and that's all I'm saying is like you get stuck in this. It ends up being brutal only because it's good. Right? Like, It's not like we're not like the Pistons. It's like, hey, go out and lose 24 straight games by 40 every night. Like that's a totally different kind of thing, right? And then
that's a different disappointment.
Of course, right? And so the Nets are just in this weird spot where they are. I still believe, even with this game, this team is exceeding expectations. Like this team went into. I know the Warriors are a tough team. They went in there. They were down a ton of points. They watched Steph go complete God mode, right, in the second half of this game. And that would be enough for you to be like, hey, we can't win, right? And by the way, Steph has spent a whole career showing guys that the teams, they cannot win when he goes into that mode, right? And he did it, and they still were down there the last shot. This is where you get stuck in between of these feelings. That's all I'm trying. I hope that makes sense.
No, 100%. I want to touch on expectations here as we go coming up in a second and talk about Steph Curry, what he did in the second half, trying to go toe-to-toe. And the thing that worked for much of the early portion of this game, Mikal Bridges on Steph Curry, just could not survive a full 4 quarters. We'll dive into that and other key sequences coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made so easy because they took all the best parts of daily fantasy, they eliminated the annoying parts, and they just made a really, really fun product that you can get into every single night. All you're doing over on Prize Picks is you're going more or less on the Prize Picks projections. So you're not wrangling with salaries. You're not going against sharks in the water over there. Prize Picks puts up their numbers, and you just go more or less on those numbers. You combine 2 to 5 players together, like the points, rebounds, assists, block deals. That's for basketball. If you want to go football, obviously touchdowns, rushing yards, receiving yards. You can even mix and match sports. So you're just, into something on a Sunday. You want to get a little hoops, a little NFL. It's all there for you over on Prize Picks right now. You go over to prizepicks.com. /LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. It's prizepicks.com /LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy.
All right, so as we continue our wrap-up of the Brooklyn Nets Saturday night special, 124-120 loss to the Golden State Warriors. We said it there at the end. Just quickly on expectations, I want to the one thing is, I think I'm close to, you mentioned at the end that you still believe this team is exceeding expectations. And I know what you mean by that, but I also think we're getting to the place where it's no longer exceeding expectations because we've reset. There's something different now in terms of what you want out of this season. And it's why it makes a game like this. We said coming in, like, go get this win, get to 2-2 on the road trip, make it possible to have a winning West Coast trip before you come back home, knowing you even have the Nuggets back at Barclays Center coming up here. But in the fourth quarter of this game, and really the second half as well, Mikal Bridges did an excellent job guarding Steph Curry for a lot of this game. And then Steph Curry took over. And I know we're going to talk about Cam Thomas too, and a wasted excellent performance from him. This is also one of those moments when you say, okay, if Steph Curry is going to play 35 minutes, go 14 to 22, 6 of 8 from beyond the arc, and drill some of those just classic Steph Curry kind of shots, and then even get to the lane and hit that awkward falling away floater bank shot late in the fourth quarter that really felt like you were getting a taste of, oh, this may not be the Nets kind of day. I think, does that soften or hurt? Does that soften or harden the blow to you? Because for me, in the fourth quarter, when Steph Curry was off like that, I think, all right, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's Steph Curry. If he's going to do that, then yeah, we're probably going to lose this game. As opposed to, if it wasn't for his performance, I would look at it as, well, then you got to get that win. Curry didn't even do his Curry-like things, and you were in this game late. Like, that makes it a little more palatable to me. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, it was watching him go into that mode. We've seen it happen for him for so long over his career, right? Like, we just seen this version of Steph that goes off. And at times, especially with the Nets, unless you have Durant or Kyrie, you can feel like you just don't have the requisite firepower to stay in games when he's
Sure.
like that, right? Like, it's going to feel really, really tough. It's demoralizing. This is why he's won multiple championships. This is why he's one of the greatest players ever, is because when he gets into this mode, it doesn't matter what you do. He just makes everything. I mean, he was so in his bag. He called the timeout. Like, after the one that looked like it was a total backbreaker, he starts throwing a timeout Jock Vaughn's way. And because he just knows, like, he kind of knows it's over. Now, on the same token, the Nets have a guy, that can, on a scoring, when he's fully in his bag on a scoring night, almost can go toe to toe. It's not as consistent as Curry, but I mean, we've already seen Cam Thomas be able to score. And sometimes you can tell really early if it's going to be happening. And this one, you definitely could tell that it was happening, where he can go toe to toe with some of these guys in terms of just like scoring. And so what makes it also a brutal gut punch is that, one, that Curry does it. Two, on the other hand, you get Cam Thomas goes for 41 points, 15 for 24, right? Like, he's just putting on like sort of this, like, it's almost at this point vintage Cam Thomas performance that we've seen many times.
Yeah.
And you just absolutely hate to waste these performances too, where it's like, oh, we're going to get this guy. They're going to turn him out. We're going to turn him loose. They're going to play him a million minutes, and which was definitely the plan. He's going to score all the points and they're going to lose. And so it's like, we had our own kind of God mode thing going here.
Yeah.
And maybe only one God could win, I guess, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, War of the Worlds, War of the Gods, something like that. There's a movie out there about that. And it was, even that fourth quarter when Curry hit the big shots, and even Klay Thompson had a big one in there. There were other Warriors that contributed in this fourth, but by and large, it was Cam Thomas that was answering the bell. Okay, I'll go down the other end. I'll set up in the corner. Spencer Dinwiddie had 14 assists in this game. Like, I'll get set up, right? You knew that you needed to feed him. One of the unfortunate things too here, and this isn't even a knock about it, but as you get into the later sequences of the fourth quarter, you could tell, and Jock Vaughn tried to do this. Let's go offense for defense here, because Cam was getting switched onto by Curry and getting kind of beaten up there a little bit in some of those late sequences. Not knocking Cam Thomas. Without him in his 41 points, we know this game is an absolute mess. But it is hard, right? Because now you're trying to thread this needle of getting him off the court and bringing him back on. I think it's right to go offense for defense, and then you get a little breakout quick play for the Nets. It goes back the other way, and you lose 3 possessions. And there is some weird equation going on. If you're Jock Vaughn in the Nets, when it comes to Cam Thomas and he's cooking like this, you're like, we need every single bucket we can get out of him. We also need to steal 1 or 2 defensive possessions here, and that equation just could not add up quite right, especially in the fourth quarter. We talk about some of those rebounding sequences and just trying to get transitioning from a defensive rebound, getting into the offense. One of the many costly turnovers that ended up just being like the undoing for Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think he was going to track to play around 40 minutes in this game. He just got the 5th foul, and like the 2:40 mark, they had to take him out, right? And I mean, maybe it's offense, defense, and they're worried that like with the 5 fouls, he's just going to be too much of a liability on defense. Maybe he just didn't want to foul out. Look, I don't want to spend too much time in this. I'm always in between on these kind of things. I think I would have just left him in with the 5 fouls. Like, I think he had just been too good, and because you get stuck in this thing. It's like, well, you could take him out with 5 fouls, or he could foul out. Either way, he doesn't play. So you might as well just play him until he gets the 6th foul. Right? Like, it's just
if the premise is the 5th foul is like what cues Jacques Vaughn to bring him out, then yeah, I agree. Like, hey, if it's about the foul situation, leave him in. If it's specifically you're trying to steal offensive and defensive possessions, then I'm okay. Like, then I'm okay with it, because again, those lead ups there are just a few sequences where it's like, switch on to Cam, get a good look, switch on to Cam, get a good look. And don't get me wrong, Steph Curry also hit big shots over top of Nicholas Claxton, extending out beyond the foul line. So it really didn't matter maybe in the end who was going to guard against him. generally speaking, though, yeah, I always agree with you. It's like you don't get to take the fouls with you. So having him burn out on one more, was it really going to matter in the end? Probably not. The sequences, I think, play out about even no matter which way you slice those final 240.
What I really hope doesn't happen after this game for Cam, and I've seen this happen before in different, sort of just media sectors talking about his game, is the idea that when he scores a lot of points, like they don't win. And there's like the ridiculous. I'm not even going to quote it because I'm not even going to actually look it up, but it's something like when he scores like 40 plus points, they have way more losses than wins. And it's something like that. That is. It's ridiculous to count these. It's totally arbitrary numbers, and the idea that him scoring more makes the team worse is ridiculous, especially when it's super efficient like it was tonight, right? Yeah. Okay, maybe if he's gonna do this 40 points or 35 points on 30 shots, okay, we'll start talking about it. When it's 41 points on 24 shots, we just don't need to talk about this. And I really hope that these are not the kind of things that happen, because I think what we're seeing is continued growth from him. And just the idea, when he has it going, like he has it tonight, you just do need to play him all the minutes and just see what happens. And I'm really encouraged by that. And it's unfortunate that the end result is that they don't win this game, because it's there's nothing about it that, no one's even contesting this. I just seen this before this, right?
No.
Because he has because at times the stat line for him does get one dimensional, right? The assists really they don't come in bunches. He 37 minutes, 2 assists tonight, and I get that. But if he had 91% true shooting in the first half, he was the whole team. He was the only reason that they even were able to stay. And I know this isn't against you; you're not contesting this, but that's the only reason they were even down 16. Or whatever they were at the time, and not down way more. He was literally the only guy that could do anything for long stretches in this game.
No. And by the way, I'm on the same page with you, because it's the thought that I had. I had this thought watching the game about, Cam's cooking. He's going for 35. Looks like he's going to clear 40 here. Somebody somewhere is going to say, well, when Cam scores, the Nets lose, right? And guess what? Not every game is created equal. Games this year are not created equal. He is the reason you're in this game. He's the reason you're in most games. When he scores on volume like that, that is a massive proponent of how they're going to win game X or game Y. And without him in this one, you'd be talking such a different stat line here. Nobody else would be able to do it. Nobody else could fill in a 41-point performance like he does. So hopefully that's not a narrative that comes out of this. It's just unfortunate, because you also, by the way, though, do want Cam Thomas to get rewarded for these games, right? That's a part of it. You want the team to get rewarded for it. Spencer Dinwiddie, if I'll just close out this thought on it before we talk about the road trip and the rest of these bench players, the bench for the Nets did not have much to say in this particular matchup. Spencer Dinwiddie, he gave you the 16 points, but I said the 14 assists, right? He leaned into that role too. So it's in games like these, you want everyone that served the right role correctly to get rewarded by saying, and the result is you get wins in those scenarios. So unfortunately, the Nets don't get over the line here. Coming up in a second, let's take a look at Mikal Bridges. Let's take a look at Cameron Johnson. He is starting to bubble up in the fan base's mind now. And could he have been a more contributing factor in this one? Where do our expectations lie with him? We'll get into that in just 1 second.
All right. No better time to get in on the action with our friends over on FanDuel. Right now, over on FanDuel, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It's $150 if your team wins. So if maybe you were hedging your bets a little bit on your fandom, you maybe bet the money line on the Warriors tonight because maybe the Nets don't win. I still see a little bit of money in the pocket. If the Warriors take it down on the money line, they would have here, but Nets actually they didn't -3.5. It was -3.5. I was going to say one of the best teams against the spread. Warriors, those luck boxes, pull it out against the spread as well, winning by 4. Either way, if you had bet the Warriors on that money line as a new customer, you better be walking away with $150 in bonus bets. Not just that, spreads, player props, over under, so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on this NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA.
All right, so as we tie a bow on the Saturday night special, 124-120 loss for the Brooklyn Nets, 1-3 on the road trip. They got one more game against the Jazz, and even though Doug and I both got pretty excited after that win over the Phoenix Suns, it does look like the 2-3 that you and I said would be a successful road trip. We can be in line for that. Got to focus up when it comes to the Jazz. Looking inside this box score, though, too, obviously we can talk about Spencer Dinwiddie mentioned the 14 assists for him. it's a solid game for Bridges from a box score perspective, but 6 of 17 from the field, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. You mentioned that little bunny layup that doesn't go in. That probably
real quick on that one. I just want to ask you a question before we move on to another thing. That final shot, it was Cam Thomas has 41 points in this game. Bridges is 6 for 17 and had struggled at times, right? I'm not trying to be leading with this. Would you have run that last play for Cam or for Mikal? Because I think there's probably some debate one way or the other here about who should have taken this last shot. What did you like the shot? Did you like the play call? I mean, like I guess we never really talked about that as a choice here.
Yeah, I mean, ball goes in, good play call, right? Ball doesn't go in, bad call. I'll answer that with the way that I talk about some of the young players on the team, right? Then we talk about Jalen Wilson played some tonight, right? Trenton Watford. I love seeing young guys play. I love seeing young guys get rewarded. And mostly what that is the theme of I like seeing guys that are playing well get rewarded, right? Sometimes I say to you, maybe you play Royce a little less in that game and you lean in more minutes. And you say, well, the hierarchy you have says what you go with. Cam Thomas is cooking in this game.
Yeah,
Cam Thomas should get the final shot, right? Like he's been the guy. He's the reason you're still in the game. He's the reason you're able to come back in this one. He has 41 points. Not a knock on Mikal. I think it's just that thing where you go, hey, hot hand. And the Nets are not a team built with a Luka, a Kyrie, a Kevin Durant, a LeBron James, where it's like obviously the best player, clearly is going to get that ball, right? And then he chooses. Now, I always trust Mikal probably to make the right basketball decision in those spots. But yeah, designing it and having it drawn up for a Cam Thomas in this type of game, yeah, makes all the sense in the world. Because when he's on. Like he is 91 true shooting percentage, first half kind of on.
Yeah, I think the only thing that maybe factored in there was he had just sat. Now, again, this is on Vaughn too, because I wouldn't have sat him either. But maybe he basically had been sitting out up to that point, and like maybe he's cold coming off the bench. The shot for Bridges was a good one. I mean, It was basically nearly uncontested. He blew a layup. He blew it. I mean, there's no other way to phrase it. I do think it's a little. I would have liked to see Thomas. It's like, hey, you put in 41, you couldn't miss. We're putting your hands here. I don't see who pushes back against that. And I did rewatch the play to see if he had been like a primary option and Bridges had been a secondary one, but it wasn't. It was clearly for Bridges from the beginning. Like Thomas was in the dunker spot with pods on him, and that was kind of it. So, anyway, I probably would have done this a little bit differently, but I just wanted to, I don't know. I'm not like, I'm not going to roll over and lose sleep over it because I still think the look was pretty good. And I think if Mikal Bridges is taking your last shot, I mean, remember we're like 4 games removed from him hitting a buzzer beater against the Hawks. So it's not like this guy hasn't been in the spot.
It's less about,
you make a really good
Mikal.
point. You make a good point that like the team doesn't really have a true alpha, and lacking that, I probably would default to hot hand.
Yeah, I think it's okay for the Nets to potentially to be that type of team. Again, good shot, doesn't go down. But like I say, point blank miss. It is what it is. The other thing that lastly that I'll just bring up here inside of it is when you look in, no bench in this game tonight for the Brooklyn Nets, right? You flip it over to the Warriors side where you had Wiggins, you had Saric. They came in and gave you 26 points combined on their own, 4 points kicked in from a couple other guys. But by the way, I mean, Chris Paul, I say a couple other guys. He's one of those other guys who had 11 assists in this game coming off the bench. You just didn't have any of the juice in this one. Now it's minimal minutes for Watford, Wilson, and Sharp, 34 for Royce O'Neal. So Jacque Vaughn just shortens the bench right up, gets very tight and very restrictive with it. On the one hand, I get it, and everybody scores double digits. The other side of it, though, is that your bench has always been a factor for you. Like part of the reason you win these games for that. But given the guys you don't have, that to me tells the whole tale here. Who you don't have available is like, well, yes, our bench, but that's when we have 3 or 4 other guys available to choose from.
Just because you sit on the Nets bench doesn't mean you get good by sitting there. And
although
at
some
some
of the
point,
samples say maybe that's all it takes, Doug.
At some point, you lose enough guys, right? No DSJ, no Lonnie Walker, obviously no Dorian Finney-Smith. They really could have used him tonight. Yeah. And so at that point, I'm all for what Vaughn did, and this is not going to be the matchup for Sharp. Like there's just going to be too much Steph stuff and too much switching, and they're going to brutalize him that way in the pick and roll. And so I'm all for. I'm actually
regard too that as impressed as we have been with Day'Ron Sharp, we still see matchups where you go, oh, this is going to be rough to have him really out there on the floor.
Exactly. And they tried Jalen Wilson looked lost. Like he just didn't, it's not his fault. Like this is a really tough matchup. They run so much motion. Like it's going to be really hard to jump in there. So I'm actually fine with the shortening of the rotation, especially when they saw that the game was starting to get within reach. Like I think when they saw that especially in the second half when they had a chance, like that third quarter where they go up 35, or they put up a 35-25 third quarter, and they see that, oh, we might have these guys a little on the ropes. And they do. I mean, the Warriors are still working out their own mess. Like you said, they just changed their starting lineup 2 games ago. This is a team that's dealing with all new rotations. Obviously, no Draymond. So like it's a team in flux. And the second that they put them on the ropes, they get the crowd completely out of it for a long stretch, right? And to get all the way back in. I mean, at that point, I'm all for leaning all the way on these minutes. I mean, these are huge starter minutes. Dinwiddie 40 minutes, McHale's 42 minutes. Even Cam, Cam would have, I believe for sure Cam would have played 40 minutes if he hadn't picked up that 5th foul. I do feel pretty strongly around that. That would have been an unbelievable load for him. So I'm all for the consolidation of minutes around the starters, especially with this group, because they are just getting thin on the bench. They've lost too many dudes at this point. So yeah, it's hard to argue with the rotations. I like to see this every once in a while. It's a playoff rotation. It's like these are our 6 best guys. This is all you're going to get tonight.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And it ends up not being enough. So that's a bummer. They fall to 1-3 here now. And we said we're going to stick around here, obviously, as we always do, live on YouTube for a little bit with you, the fans. You can throw up your questions as we work our way towards that. But it does change the complexion now and put a bit of a spotlight, just to briefly look ahead, on that Utah Jazz game, right? Because now we can say all the things we want about this game. Hey, they were down, they fought back, it was close, they had a chance, If they go out and lose against the Jazz, and then it's just a 1-4 road trip. Like, it doesn't matter. We won't, we always talk about, when you look back, you won't worry about who was playing on the other side of the court when you got the wins. They're W's in the column. Guess what? When we look back, it's just going to be 1-4 on a road trip, and now you're coming home, and you have some difficult matchups too. So it does require this team, which has been really good at it, to be like, wipe, reset, and let's get ourselves back on track. The Dorian Finney-Smith injury here is going to be interesting to watch too, because now we are also butting up against just that timeline of, okay, now it's too many injuries. Like now we're getting to the point where the depth that we have built is starting to get eroded, at least in the short term.
Yeah, I do feel still pretty good about the Jazz matchup. Doesn't seem like the Jazz want to win at all these days. They already lost. I will do a game preview on this one, so I don't go too far into this one, but still feel okay about that Jazz game. And overall, if you just look at this from the top down, I think it's hard to feel, again, bone crushingly disappointed with how the road trip has gone so far, right? The Kings game was rough. They beat the Suns. They got crushed by the Nuggets. That was always going to be tough. Yeah. And now, and this one was close. And so it's hard. We knew this was going to be one of the more difficult, if not the most difficult 4-game stretch of the entire season. And so I don't know. I think I'm overall, like, my opinion of the team has not really changed at all over these games. I don't think, except that I just know that my expectations are climbing a little bit higher and higher each time because of that they play well a lot of these games, and that's just sort of where they end up landing. So I don't know. We still got a bunch to talk about. Like I said, we're going to stick around here in YouTube.
I do
live.
want to slay this. Sorry, just a quick closing thought here. I do want the Nets to slay this proverbial dragon of, like, the Golden State Warriors have name cachet, right? They are a dynasty.
This would have felt
good.
Yeah.
You want that, right? And then, by the way, that's what the Phoenix one was, right? You're the new big three. You want to give us a taste of our own medicine? We beat you, right? Like that's the one thing here of these next 10 or 15 games. When you see a marquee matchup on it, I do want to see it kind of be, oh, the Nets are a team that you can get snake bit by and can steal a couple of these games. It did it against Phoenix, couldn't do it against Golden State. So that's probably just my last, like, next step for this team, is be that problem for some of the better teams and start to say, maybe we're actually climbing up that pecking order a little bit more. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Just to clarify, I would say my feeling of the team has not changed at all.
No.
And this was really disappointing. Like, I was pissed that they lost this game. And that's again only because my expectations of the team are rising, right? And so I think that's just where you end up landing. Again, this is paradox of sports. Okay, we're going to stick around here in YouTube. We will be talking Cam Johnson a little bit as well. Make sure you throw in your comments there. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed over on YouTube. If you're in there right now, a lot of people over in chat, make sure you hit subscribe. Don't be silly. This is free. Just get the subscribe, get the alerts. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast as well.
And of course, when Mikal Bridges missed that little layup, he was heard to say, "I miss you in ways that not even words can understand." That's Gemma Troy.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back in a second on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. Coming up, when the post-game podcast ends, the post-podcast begins, talking everything from the most recent matchup to other narratives around the Brooklyn Nets. And tonight, is Cameron Johnson taking a step back? We talk about the regression of the off-season big budget contract here in a moment.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And Doug, it is the post-pod pod. It's where we maybe carry over a narrative we didn't quite get to. If you're in on the live chat, obviously, as we always say, at Locked On Nets, throw your questions up. We'll be sure to get to them. One, Cameron Johnson. Why didn't we talk about him more? Well, he was 5 of 12, 3 of 7 from deep, 13 points in 29 minutes of game action. 29 minutes of game action. Some people speculate that maybe he's still coming back, the injury, fatigue, the whatever. He sat on the bench a lot in FIBA. That could be wearing him down a little bit. Where is your concern level right now with Cameron Johnson based on what we thought was a pretty reasonable baseline expectation coming into the year?
Yeah, it's so funny. This is a guy, we mentioned it briefly a couple of podcasts ago, that this is a guy that we just haven't spoken much about this year because it hasn't been good enough to really spend an episode talking about him. And it hasn't been bad enough to start to panic about it. It's just been kind of, it's been kind of like, it hasn't been bad. It hasn't been great. There's like no world where he's not probably vastly underperforming the contract once you back out the injuries. Like that's happened to everybody. Sure. So I'm not going to count injuries against the guy. So like his rate stats aren't a disaster zone, and no one would make the contention that he's outplaying the contract at all. I mean, It's not even close to that. And so he just gets stuck in this sort of no man's land of on the court, sees his minutes, hits some threes. That's kind of it. And I don't know if like that ranks as a disappointment at this point. I think that it's been just kind of regular for this amount of money over this many games. I probably think we are probably trending into the disappointment territory. Just because there's been no growth. We talked about this guy as a potential, and maybe this is our bad, but we've been talking about as a potential most improved player. Like he's going to see a ton more shots. We'll see the game expand. He got paid. There's been none of that. The numbers are the same / worse as they were when he was with the Nets last year. And a couple are a tick better, but it's like the same. And I don't know. I think that's probably below expectations.
And you talk about the month of December alone. Now you would back out the blowout game, obviously against Denver, only plays 22 minutes, but even at that, 17 points. That's his month high right now. He's averaging 13 points a game in the month of December. Now, the thing you can like about it is the three-point shooting seems to have come on a bit stronger here, 43% for the month. He's closer to last season's number, 38, than maybe is what we think his career average should be, above 40. So, like, there's these little things you can look and point at. The shots, in terms of number of attempts, that's basically identical from last year. The three-point attempts are basically identical from last year. And you're right, like, maybe the most improved attachment. I mean, well, not maybe, clearly that was an overstep on our part based on what we've seen so far this season. But on top of that, though, like we were saying, last year with the Nets, he averaged a little over 16 points a game. And we said, okay, can you expect him to be a 20-point scorer? Maybe not, but 18 plus, sure. He's not going to come near that number, right? He's trying to push himself up to 15 points a game. Now, maybe the Cam Thomas, explosion and his emergence and being in the starting lineup affects it. But you'd like to think that the gravity of having a scorer like that would make it even easier for a Cam Johnson to have some success. So I don't know. I don't know when I would start to push the, this is not necessarily what we thought we were investing in button, but we're close to it. Like he needs to be a 17, 18-point scorer, a 16-point scorer minimum every single night, and it shouldn't really take a Herculean effort to get there.
It's funny too, because I could probably explain away all the dips in production, right? Like the usage is down and the shots per game are down because Cam Thomas's are way up, right? Oh, if you could just compare it to last year, if you just go back to last year and look at his numbers from last year, when he was only with Brooklyn, right? Isolate just for his time with Brooklyn, and then you look at This year, you're like, okay, the shots are down. It's like, well, Cam Thomas is taking way more and everyone's fine with that, right? So, and there's only so many shots to be had. And so that explains that. But beyond that, though, I just think that like even with that understanding, and Cam missed a bunch of time too. So like, so there was some injury there for Cam Thomas. And it's not like we saw a great expansion during that time either, right? And then you're like, okay, well, the defensive stats are way down. Well, they're playing a different scheme here. They're playing more drop. It's going to lead to less stuff at the rim for him, which is going to mean less steals and less blocks. And his numbers are basically the same as they were when he played in Phoenix, when they played drop defense with Ayton. So it's like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense too, right? If you're just going to change the defensive stuff, you were just going to be less on the ball near the rim when guys are taking shots, so you get less blocks. Okay. I think it's just this general feeling, though. It's like I can look at each individual number and say, I could probably explain that. Right. But I just still think that there was an expectation that he'd be like more like a number 2, right? A number 2 kind of guy in terms of scoring.
Based on the current Brooklyn Nets hierarchy, right? He'd be your number 2 behind.
I mean, what he's a 5th best player this year, 6th. You can't put him higher than he's that. You can't put him in the top 5, probably, right? Like seasons that you take over his right now. This is not in any order. No, Cam Thomas for sure. Yep. Mikal Bridges for sure. Yep. Dinwiddie for sure.
Yep.
Claxton probably.
And probably Dorian Finney-Smith too. If we're being honest, like, I mean, he'd at least be right there, right? I mean, listen, based on expectations, you'd have to.
It shouldn't even be close. The problem is we shouldn't even
be.
It shouldn't even be close on these discussions. Like, we shouldn't even. There should be no debate really after coming out of last year about this list. It should be definitive, and it's just not. And I think that's the problem.
And just to clarify here, I mean, he's averaging almost 12 shots per game this year. Same exact number that he was averaging last year coming over to Brooklyn. He's averaging the same exact average of 3-point shot attempts per game. One other area that I'll even look at too was I thought, and this is just solely, I think, a me thing. He averaged 3.5 free throw attempts last year in 27 games with Brooklyn. That was a big jump from any other season playing in Phoenix. It's right back down to a shot and a half at the line. I thought that some of the closeouts, and again, you want him shooting 3-pointers first, but I just thought that the way I perceived his game to be, okay, now in the closeouts, he'll be able to get in the lane a little bit more. He'll be able to attack at the basket a little bit more. He's very good, actually. And last year, he went towards the basket more in coming over to Brooklyn than he had previously with Phoenix. So there were all these little breadcrumbs that I thought were going to lead to something a little bit better. Maybe it is, though. Again, he had injuries early in the season. He has not played the same level of minutes that other guys have here. Like that, I find a little bit interesting, too. And maybe it just comes down to roles and where everybody fits in. I want to ask maybe a rotation question about that, and we'll open up to some comments as well. But do you have, if rewind it back, is this offseason contract as for Cam Johnson as much about Mikal Bridges as it is about Cameron Johnson? Like, is there like at least a little bit of this? Just it's not Mikal Bridges strong arm in the organization. It's just the organization like kind of reading the room and saying Mikal Bridges loves Cameron Johnson. He came over in the trade. He is a good player. And we're not really going to scoff at like overspending a bit here because this is kind of the harmonious nature we're going for to start this season.
I will answer that in 1 second.
Oh, teaser.
First, I'll tell you one more time about our friends over at FanDuel. No better time to get in on the FanDuel action. With new customers over on FanDuel, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's right. You put in a bet on the money line. Your team wins. You're going to grab $150 in bonus bets. Use those bonus bets on everything on the site. Spreads, over-unders, so many player props. You can spend the whole day just going through all the different player props. This is an IKB situation too. I know better. Get in on those player props, especially when it comes to the Nets. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Tip off this NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA.
Okay, so you little tease, you go ahead and answer the question. Do you think that played a factor at all potentially for this team?
Okay, so no one disagreed with re-signing him. No one really disagreed with the money. I think there was pretty universal understanding that the contract was fine. It wasn't like a max contract or anything. There's bonus. It's bonus laden. So I think the average yearly thing is like 18 or 19. It's
far lower
not
than
a great
kind of where we were all fearing it could have ballooned to the way it was structured.
Exactly. Probably a little bit above market, but I think if we're remembering our sentiment at the time, it was this is fine, right?
Yep.
Like now, and we always knew he was gonna get paid. These guys are the face of the Durant contract. They were the twins, like they're attached to the hip. They were the guys that came in for Durant. It's important to kind of keep that consistency. Selling these guys off would have just not something that the organization was interested or is interested in doing, mostly from the optics. And so I don't think like Mikal Bridges got him the money. I think all the other stuff. I think he was a good player. He's a good player, right? And he happened to be tied to the biggest trade the organization made ever. I mean, or recent years with Durant. And just to have him get shipped out for nothing, or lose him in restricted free agency, which is not something they were going to do. And so I don't have a problem. I don't think any of that's the truth. I think it's just mostly been like, I go back to my thing before. It's you wanted to see some kind of leap, and there just hasn't happened. I think that's what it is. You want to see some kind of linear growth, and there hasn't been any. And I think that's the problem.
I'm gonna have a follow-up question here, but actually, just to open it up to some of the comments, this is a good one from Just Tweaking. Kyrie pieces are better than KD pieces. How about that?
Bridges is by far the best part of any of these deals. Come on, stop.
If you were talking about DFS, DFS
plus
versus
the picks.
Cameron Johnson, right? Like you might be having a conversation.
Well, yeah. I mean, you put Dinwiddie plus DFS plus the picks. It's not close because Mikal's so much better, but
But it is actually a little more interesting than not, right? Just with the way Cameron Johnson's performed at this point. Does this now to you, though, this is probably the next good question. Does this open up to you the possibility of saying, hey, when we think about our rotations, Cameron Johnson no longer needs to be looked at as, well, of course he's starting when he's healthy. Is there a world where you start to think about like maybe we have some best versions of lineups where we put you in the second unit and maybe that actually makes you more effective or gives you a better chance to maximize what your value is?
See, I think this is the problem in the conversation. I don't think any of us are contending that he's been bad. He has not been bad. Like he's been fine. He's been fine. It's that the expectation, this is what always happens to us too. Everybody. When you make more money, the expectations go up. That's just what happens.
More money, more problems. They said that.
Cam Johnson, if he was a $1 player, he'd be the best player in the history of basketball at that contract, right? Okay. If he was getting paid $50 million a year, it'd be one of the worst $50 million a year. So we can all agree on the parameters. At some point, the contract's amazing. At some point, it's a disaster. And now we're just trying to choose where in between it is. He's not been bad. He's been fine. He's been a fine player. He's been virtually identical to the player he was last year. The problem was last year he made a lot less money and he hadn't signed up for 4 years. The second you do that, the expectations go up and you expect the production to go up. That is the second part that has not happened. He's the same guy. He's the same guy. So if you just thought 23 million was a fine number for that guy, then you're fine with it. And probably for the most part we are. Again, we have not talked about this much because he's been mostly fine. It's just that he just hasn't been better, and that's the problem.
Right. I feel like I just got filibustered here. I'll go back to my question, Doug.
Sorry.
Do you think it's okay to discuss him maybe being in the bench unit? And I'm agreeing.
Oh no,
with you,
sorry.
He's not been bad. He's been good. Like he hasn't been the next step, but he's been good. This isn't even a knock on him. It's just about maybe there's just better value for him in this team if it's constructed around a different looking unit as opposed to always being assumed he goes in and starts.
Okay, short answer. No, I would continue to start him. Sorry. Okay. I thought I was kind of making that point, but I really wasn't. No. I would continue to start him. That is not the contention I'm trying to make.
This was a good one here. Just a couple of things. We'll hit a couple of comments here. We're talking about just top 5 guys. Lonnie Walker for number 5, if healthy. You want to put him in the mix there? Start nipping at the heels of DFS.
I can't do that because I can't do things like that because guys who get put in like the perfect situations against bench units and stuff like that. Like he's been great. Don't get me wrong, but he's also
not maximized going to the starting unit and hold
or play
it
40 minutes or play. Johnson's not playing this many minutes either, but he's not playing 30 minutes a game every night.
Right.
Taking multiple defensive assignments. He was a get off the bench and cook guy. He's great. It's nothing against Lonnie. I'm just saying you can't really compare these guys. Like they don't do the same things. He's not your 5th best player. He just hasn't played enough. I don't know. It's close. I'm not trying to knock. Sometimes if you say something's not something, it sounds like you're knocking them. I'm not doing that.
No. I think, we've talked about this before. It's like, who's your let's say like your 5 to 8, right? Your 5 to 9 for this team. I think over 2 and 3 game stretches, you circle a different name and say, well, he was really critical for this run, right? This player really stepped up over these handful of games. Dorian Finney-Smith, in the absence of Cam Johnson at the start of the year, was absolutely critical for this team. So certainly some different angles to think about, but just to be clear, like by and large, and Doug's fine. I've been fine with what Cameron Johnson has done. I just think I need to recalibrate my expectations, right? Just like bring him back down to neutral. and then carry forward like that. Same way that I don't look at Royce O'Neal and go, well, why isn't Royce O'Neal coming in and locking up dudes defensively? Or why isn't he exceeding expectations by X or Y, right? Once you settle in on that, then you can look at them and I think evaluate them a little bit more accurately.
Dude, Cam Johnson was the most expensive net playing tonight. He made the most money of any net on the court. Now that's a function of sort of like how things have like sort of shaken out. Like Mikhail's got one of the best contracts in the league right easily right now. So it's where you can afford to, and obviously, Simmons isn't around and Cam Thomas is still on the rookie contract, blah, blah, blah. But it is funny when you think about it, it's like, oh, he's the most expensive bet. You're like, oh, that doesn't really track, that's just something.
It doesn't help when you're like, oh, you are the highest paid player on the and right now. Interesting.
Yeah, it just seems
I noticed
a little bit weird.
Kind of standing in the corner, just seeing what happens. Like, yeah. So again,
all right. If you have some questions,
that's also the funky nature, just of like the way the Nets and the Simmons. You said Simmons contract, all this stuff. Like it's going to be weird waters all the way through next season too. By the way, because guess what, Ben Simmons' money will still be here.
Oh yeah, 100%. Look at some throw some
100%
comments up here. Cam J and Doug must be friends. We're not friends. I don't know.
You know what I do appreciate? Can I use Just Tweak in here? We had him up before. I always appreciate Doug and I could sit here and do, the thing with like I say a word, you say a word. It's like that little, comedy routine. We could go word for word through a paragraph about, say, Cam Johnson and the way we feel about him, how he's played. If there was a disagreement from the viewing or listening audience, it's always like, Doug, Cam Johnson fanboy. I always get just slightly stepped off to the side. Doug's a real problem, and I'm just here, voice of the people.
It's all right. I'm Teflon. None of this stuff bothers me. You could say you'd be shocked at how little any comment or derision like that would bother me. I got one here because Daryl just threw this up. We've talked about this on the previous thing. How do you have a player with four? This is for those on the podcast feed. How do you have a player with 40 and not attempt to draw the final play for him? Why does Jock still not rely on this kid like he should? It's frustrating. We talked about this a little bit ago. So if you're just jumping into the live show, just to really quickly round out on this, the final shot, I'm totally with you on this. This is confusing to me, and I'm usually like, I don't know, draw something up that makes sense, like, and doesn't necessarily have to be for a guy or whatever, but the disparity in point scoring and efficiency was so stark in this game that it does feel like we are sometimes at times. It goes back to what we said about Jacques Vaughn and sort of like sometimes not trusting that he's going to trust the young guys, or like what point he develops trust. This to me feels like another example of that, of he just doesn't, it's like begrudging to him. He doesn't want to play young guys. It seems like, and maybe he just never wanted to play Cam tons. Like, I'm not really sure. It's just like weird. I agree that it's weird that he didn't take the shot. Now, again, Mikal Bridges is like 4 games away from hitting a buzzer beater. So he has done this. But I just don't think it's odd.
More than anything, the footnote I'll put to that is that, like, I think sometimes in a season like this, it's okay to quote, and I'm not, it wouldn't even be sacrificing, but it's okay to say, we're going to quote, sacrifice this game to try to give Cam Thomas this special moment. And by the way, it's like, you're not sacrificing anything. He scored 41 points, right? But if you're philosophically, you have things constructed a certain way around final sequences and who's going to get the shot and the game plans that you draw up. In a game where he's gone for 41, you go, listen, throw it out. Let's let him have one. If it goes in, it's a beautiful thing and it's a great moment for him and whatever it looks like. And if he misses it, okay, so be it, right? And I'll say this, and this will come across like I'm defending Jacques Vaughn. I think the push and pull of trusting young players, but also maybe overprotecting young players. Like, I think that Vaughn at times goes out of his way to feel like, I want to avoid these guys being in bad sequences. We talk about, was Thomas taken out because of the 5th foul? Protecting him against the 6th foul? Maybe. He's done that with everybody. Is he doing it offense for defense because he doesn't want to just be out there to take licks, to try and defend Curry? Hey, listen, at some point, it just is what it is. And these guys, and Cam Thomas specifically, has proven that he can get his butt licked on the defensive end and still go down the other way and keep firing and making buckets for you. I'm going to highlight this real quick here, just so people know for a future episode. We will be talking about this. Anyone else sick of seeing Cam Thomas package for Spida trades on the timeline? Listen, there's a lot of packages getting thrown around right now for Donovan Mitchell. I'm not going to say anything more than we are going to talk about it. We're going to examine the packages around and have that discussion. I have some fairly crystallized thoughts when it comes to a Donovan Mitchell trade and what the Nets should or shouldn't be doing. So we will be getting into that upcoming this week.
Just real quick, I had one that worked on the trade machine. I'll give it to you real fast.
Oh, here it goes. Yeah.
Ben Ben Simmons, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, and Royce O'Neal. Nets get back Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley. The money works. So
yeah, Nets are probably giving up too much there, just for me, But
I put that
like
up there.
You've got a good baseline.
You would not believe how many people did not understand that was a joke. I'm never surprised by it, like by how many people don't get the joke. But
we're always surprised.
Well, here's the thing: there was lots that not only didn't get the joke, thought the Nets should say no. Like
even worse off is that they were like, no,
like
way.
You're sending out Royce. What are you crazy?
Come on.
Okay. All right.
I heard. By the way, other discussions we can have is that I've also seen, and we love the conversations. We love the the different talking points. I've seen people suggesting, think about extending Royce O'Neal. Let's extend Royce. Let's get him on a team-friendly kind of contract here. Why talk about trades with him when you could go ahead and extend him until he's 34, 35 years old, just to really peak that value out? Tamro, has Dinwiddie ever changed a ref's mind? That's just a good one.
I love
Tamro, you dirty so-and-so.
I love this one. It's the most frustrating thing in the whole world to watch. I cannot stand when players do it. I get it's like ultra competitive and these guys complain, and some of the best complain all the time. Dinwiddie complains all the time. He get the worst technical in the world because it was on a Cam Thomas open 3 and he gets teed up when they have the ball. Like he just can't stop. So
just having a discussion here.
Here's the thing though. I guarantee that his attitude like this is one thing that does not allow people to see that he is actually good. Like you have to dig deep because if you already don't like Dinwiddie and then you watch the constant complaining and like that stuff, and it's so annoying. It's so annoying to watch it. He gets fouled in his mind. He gets fouled every time he goes to the basket. The hand goes up. You know what I'm doing? Like this. I can't do it in the camera. Like this thing. He's just like the hand goes up because he gets fouled. That I know for sure that very, very, very annoying histrionic stuff that he does get in ways for people to realize that he is actually good.
It's so funny because I mean we've talked about. I know that it happens. But I do like I have such blinders on with that for Spencer Dinwiddie because of it's like had him back in the day, helped the team, goes away, comes back, whatever. But I know for a fact you put him on any other team and he's doing it, and I'm like, Jesus, this guy. So I know 100% how annoying it would be to watch it happen. It's like watching Trey. We talked about Trae Young, right? Like going to the lane, just backing himself into fouls. Like there's certain things you just hate to see aesthetically.
Yes.
But it's just funny. My total self-awareness that when Dinwiddie's doing it, I'm like, maybe it works out. Maybe he gets the call. maybe.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But I'm also able to divorce myself from the idea of that does not influence what I think he is as a basketball player. He's been good. He's been arguably the Nets' second best player this year. He's been statistically been very good. Advanced statistics been very good. He's been pretty consistent. Every once in a while, the shots that go up are a little bit head scratching, but overall. I mean, he played 31 minutes a game, less than 2 turnovers as a sort of volume-y point guard. I mean, he just is a very consistent guy. Tonight, 40 minutes, 2 turnovers. It's hilarious because the 2 turnovers were unbelievably bad passes that just basically hit fans before they hit any player on the team.
But those were literally in the third row.
So you watch those, you're like, oh, Dinwiddie again. There was only 2 turnovers in 40 minutes. He had no other turnovers in 40 minutes. He's such a weird player because he does high profile-y things that will drive you nuts, and you will only remember those things.
Diminish all the substance to his
game.
And
it wipes away everything else. It wipes away everything else in people's minds. And so then even they turn, you say you have blinders in a good way. People have blinders in the other way when it comes to Dinwiddie.
Of course, right.
They cannot stand it, and it does not matter what he does. But if you look at the stats are unassailable. He's been in net rating. He's been the Nets' best player. That's played real minutes. And so I just don't. I would encourage people to look at the whole thing here with him and not just the parts you dislike because he's just been good. He's been good. There's really no argument. He's just been a good player.
I'm just gonna throw this up real quick. Of course they can. Why not? Can the Nets beat the Knicks? But they can beat anybody. Beat the world. They just beat the Phoenix Suns. Stop it. Big 3 who. One thing, this is a little bit off topic here. Feel free to, again, at Locked On Nets. We'll start to wrap ourselves up here and get out the door on a Saturday night. We said, by the way, the shame that we felt around not being there live after the Phoenix win. This is what you get. Saturday night, even after a loss against the Warriors, we show up. For whatever reason, I had this thought during the game and, why bother filtering it? if the Warriors were starting to ship dudes off, Chris Paul, like I watch Chris Paul off the bench with that volume of assists, and I'm like, God, even the corpse of Chris Paul would be really nice for the Brooklyn Nets to have, like coming off of their bench as a pure point guard setting the table. Like it did cross my mind. Like I wonder what that looks like as the deadline approaches, because this team, the Warriors, they beat the Nets tonight, but they're going the wrong way this year.
It would sure seem like it. I mean, like, there's nothing about it that makes sense, but I agree with you as like a connector and a guy who can like run pick and roll and like sort of set other people up.
Yeah, it's
Like the
just
Nets
when you see that,
feels
you're
like they,
like, ooh, some of that. I want some of that over here, please.
yeah, I still don't think it's like totally right. I mean, I know what you're saying. It's like never going to happen, but I know
No.
what you're kind of saying. The connector piece, and yeah, I can see it, but I'm not even sure like that's what the Nets need. I think they actually need. They really just like kind of needs like guys like Simmons, like to because I don't think Bridges and Cam and guys like this need connectors as much as they need like screen setters, sort of chaos inducers, like kind of like guys like that can just and that have good vision. Like Ben that just shot 50% more at the rim. Like that's like the kind of guy that those guys would really be. Well, I mean,
Tamro's got a
I
lot of
actually
the
don't even
answers
think
there.
like Luka would be not a great fit with Cam. Like I don't think. I mean, he'd make the team way better, obviously, but if you look at who plays off ball with them, it's not guys like Cam Thomas. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, they have Dante Exum running off ball, and they've been like really good with it right now. And he's like a rangy defender, can hit some threes, doesn't need to have the ball all the time. I mean, obviously Kyrie is with them, but he's like sort of next level. But the defense has been atrocious with those guys. I don't know. I just thought I don't think that'd be a good mix. McHale would be great because he does. I don't think it can just do a couple more things and maybe just a little bit defensively. I guess my point is that like
There's a lot
I don't
of
know.
little things that there's a lot of different types of pieces that you could add to this team that would improve things, like marginal moves, not superstar level moves. But I think this is your point is like, and there's also a hierarchy to what would actually make things better, because in theory, adding a player that you're talking about, a little bit of a chaos maker, a little bit of Ben Simmons type of mold, then would make the Spencer Dinwiddie role that much more elevated, or would make Mikal Bridges' role that much more effective, right? Like, so you can get to the same end result through different means. It doesn't have to just be, oh, we need more on-ball creators, point stop in the backcourt. That's the only agenda.
How about Jokic? Add him. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens.
I was thinking about that the other day. I said Ben Simmons for Joker straight up. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, maybe get some
we'll see.
traction.
Whatever. Okay. I think we're gonna get out of here. Really appreciate everyone here. Jumped in here late on a Saturday night, even after the L. Hey, sometimes it happens. Yeah, still come in, muck it up, talk Nets basketball. We will be here probably the day after the Jazz game if we're just talking about just scheduling notes about what's coming up, because one more game on this West Coast trip and then we're going to get out of here. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe or listen to the podcast as well.
Hey, listen, it was a bad game, but I guess it's better than being The Godfather 3. That's a quote from the little-known gem of The Last Man on Earth. I'm rewatching that series right now, Doug. Having a great time.
Oh, there you go. One of the all-time great show poets. We'll be back again.
That's right.
Next
Will
week.
Forte.
Yeah, we're back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.